They thought he'd break. They thought a courtroom, a lie, and a cage would be enough to destroy him. They didn't know he had something they couldn't see. Something that made him dangerous. Not a weapon. Not a secret. A father. But not just any father. This is the story of Elijah Carter, 17 years old, arrested for a crime he didn't commit, mocked by the justice system, and left for ruin. Until the man behind the curtain stepped forward. The twist? His father wasn't some lawyer or preacher begging for mercy. He was the law itself. But just when it looked like the nightmare might end, a darker truth began to unravel. And by the time the court dismissed the charges, it was already too late. This story doesn't end with a gavel. It begins with a warning. The courtroom felt like a coffin. Dim lights. Creaking benches. The soft whisper of paperwork and side comments. The sound of people already convinced you're guilty before you even speak. 17-year-old Elijah Carter sat in silence. His jaw tight. His chest heavy. His hands clenched inside his sleeves. He wasn't just afraid. He was furious. Because this wasn't justice. It was theater. And he was the main act. It started with one choice. One instinct. Walking home from school, Elijah saw a man yelling at a woman outside a laundromat. She was cornered, scared. So he did what any decent person would do. He stepped in. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" he asked. He never touched anyone. Never raised his voice. But that didn't matter. The man, red-faced and angry, turned on Elijah. And when the police showed up, they didn't ask questions. Didn't look for the woman. They took one look at Elijah's skin, his hoodie, his presence, and made up their minds. Now, standing in court, he was branded an aggressor, a disturbance, a young thug. Judge Roland Whitaker leaned over the bench, smirking like a man who believed the verdict was already history. "Tell me, Mr. Carter," he said, "do you even understand what's happening here?" Elijah nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." The judge chuckled. "Well, I'm not so sure you do. See, in this courtroom, it's not about what you think. It's about what I know." And just like that, the laughter started. From the gallery. From the prosecutor's table. From people who didn't know Elijah at all, but thought they knew enough. Elijah lowered his eyes. Felt the weight of the cuffs, even though he wasn't wearing any. Felt the verdict in the air, before it had been spoken. But then, the door opened. Footsteps. Measured. Confident. Not rushed. Not loud. But the kind that changed the room. The bailiff blinked. The prosecutor turned pale. Judge Whitaker stopped mid-sentence. A tall man in a black coat stepped into the courtroom. Not with arrogance, but with authority. And when Elijah turned, he nearly collapsed from shock. It was his father. But not just his father. Justice Henry Carter. Supreme Court Justice. The most powerful black man on the bench in America. Judge Whitaker's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Justice Carter's voice was calm, but carved from granite. "I came to see my son." The silence was deafening. No one had expected this. Not the judge. Not the press. Not even Elijah. The boy who had been ignored, dismissed, humiliated. Suddenly, the entire room couldn't take their eyes off him. Justice Carter approached the bench, slow and deliberate. "You've made a mistake," he said. "A grave one." He motioned to the arrest report, tossed on the table like trash. "Your Honor, this case is built on lies. Assumptions. And something worse, an eagerness to convict before listening." Judge Whitaker stammered. I wasn't aware this was your..." "You weren't aware because you didn't care to be." The room sat in stunned silence. Justice Carter's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. But somehow, even more chilling. "I've spent my career defending the Constitution. And watching it be used as a weapon. But I never thought I'd watch my son be crushed beneath it." He turned to Elijah. "You held your ground. You told the truth. That's what matters." Then louder, to the judge. "I expect these charges to be dropped. And I expect this court to make it right." Judge Whitaker swallowed. He gave a weak nod. "Charges dismissed." A quiet cheer rippled in the back. A few murmurs. But Elijah? He didn't celebrate. Because something wasn't right. Not just the judge's cowardice. Something deeper. As the room emptied, Elijah leaned toward his father. "You knew he'd dismiss it." Justice Carter nodded. Elijah frowned. "But you look like that's not what you wanted." His father paused. And then, almost hesitating, he whispered, "This wasn't about the case." "What do you mean?" Justice Carter looked down at him. And for the first time, he looked afraid. "Someone wanted you to be arrested." Elijah froze. "What?" "They made sure the woman wasn't interviewed. That the body cam footage was erased. They fed Judge Whitaker this case directly." Elijah's chest tightened. "But why?" His father's eyes were cold now. "Because of who I am. Because of what I'm working on. Because they know the only way to break a man like me is through my family." He took Elijah by the shoulder, voice trembling. This wasn't just injustice. It was a message. And then a phone rang. Not a regular ringtone. A sharp, jarring beep. One Elijah didn't recognize. Justice Carter pulled it from his coat. Not his usual phone. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. "What is it?" Elijah asked. His father looked at him. And then at the courtroom doors. "We need to leave. Now." Before Elijah could respond, a man in a gray suit stepped into the doorway. No badge. No ID. No emotion. Behind him, two more. Matching suits. Matching stillness. Not cops. Not federal agents. Something else. They didn't speak. Didn't move. They just watched. Justice Carter whispered, "They're not supposed to be here yet." "Who are they?" His father looked at him, voice barely audible. "I don't know their names. But I know what they work for." He turned to Elijah. "It's called Project Ashes." Elijah's blood ran cold. "What is that?" But before he could answer, the lights flickered, and the courtroom doors slammed shut. You thought this story was over. You thought justice had been served. But what if the real danger didn't begin in the courtroom? What if it started after the verdict? Elijah Carter was just trying to walk home. Now he's standing at the center of something darker. Deeper. Buried beneath the justice system itself. Project Ashes. They came for him once. They're not done. They said it was over. The charges were dropped. The courtroom emptied. The truth had won. But sometimes, truth is just the first casualty. Because when Elijah Carter walked out of that courtroom, he didn't step into freedom. He stepped into the eye of a storm he never knew existed. The courtroom doors slammed shut behind them. Elijah stood frozen, his chest still rising and falling like he'd just run a marathon. His father, Justice Henry Carter, was calm. Too calm. His jaw clenched, eyes locked on the three men who blocked their exit. Elijah whispered, "Dad, who are they?" Justice Carter didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. The look in his eyes said it all. These weren't agents of the law. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to send a message. Or worse, to clean something up. Then, without warning, Justice Carter grabbed Elijah's arm and turned sharply toward the side door near the judge's chambers. "Now, son," he whispered. "We run." They burst through the side hallway, Justice Carter moving like a man who had memorized every exit, every blind spot. Behind them, silence. No yelling. No footsteps. Just an unnatural quiet that made Elijah's skin crawl. They reached the parking garage. Justice Carter's black sedan was waiting. As they slid into the car, Elijah looked back. Still no one. Still nothing. But that's what made it worse. "They're not chasing us?" Elijah asked. His father didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "They don't have to." The car sped through DC's back streets. Elijah stared at his father. "What's Project Ashes?" Justice Carter's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But you need to know this. What happened today wasn't a coincidence. You weren't targeted by accident." Elijah shook his head. "But why me? I'm nobody." "No," his father replied softly. "You're my son. And that means you're leverage." Elijah's mind spun. One day ago, he was just trying to help a woman in a parking lot. Now he was running from men in suits, hearing his father speak in riddles like something out of a spy movie. "You're not making sense." Justice Carter finally turned to look at him. There's a group, Elijah, hidden inside the government. Judges, politicians, COs. They call themselves the tribunal. They built something in the late 90s. A protocol. A containment strategy. It started after a wave of whistleblowers threatened to expose some of their earliest experiments. They called it Project Ashes. Elijah blinked. Experiments? Justice Carter nodded. On communities. On children. They tested behavioral control, psychological warfare, school-to-prison pipeline optimization, anything to reinforce systemic control. They hid it under the guise of public safety programs. But it never stopped. It just evolved. And now it's being revived. You were never supposed to know it existed. Elijah stared straight ahead, stunned. So you're saying my arrest was a test run? A data point? See how the public responds. See how fast they can bury the truth. Elijah's hands trembled. But how do you know all this? His father's jaw flexed. Because I used to be part of it. Years ago, before he was Supreme Court Justice Henry Carter, he was a rising star prosecutor in the federal system. Back then, he was recruited by a think tank known as the Foundation for National Order. They promised reform, structure, tools to restore trust in the system. But what they delivered was manipulation, fake arrests, false confessions, blackmail on public officials, and hidden inside it all, Project Ashes. They said it would protect society, that it would stop crime before it happened. But Henry saw what it really was. An invisible machine that consumed young black lives to keep power safe. So he walked away, burned every bridge, exposed what he could. He thought he'd buried it. But you can't kill something that was born to survive in the dark. They arrived at a townhouse near the edge of the city. No streetlights, no neighbors, no name on the mailbox. Inside it looked like a war bunker. Metal shelves, security screens, files, and someone waiting. A woman, coiled hair, tactical jacket, hazel eyes that didn't blink. Agent Marla Voss, she said. We've been watching since Elijah was detained. Elijah squinted. Watching me? She nodded. We weren't sure if the tribunal had found you. When they moved this fast, we knew. Justice Carter turned to her. Tell him what you told me. Voss nodded, walked over to a folder, opened it. Inside, photos of Elijah. At school, at the shelter, walking home, even inside his own house. We believe they've been surveilling you for at least 8 months, she said. Why? Elijah asked again. Agent Voss looked at him. Because you have something they can't predict. She pulled out a name, the Third Rail, a resistance group, underground, hidden even from most agencies. A network of whistleblowers, ex-operatives, teachers, coders, and former insiders. All of them working to dismantle Project Ashes from the inside. We think they want to recruit you, she said, or silence you before someone else does. Elijah shook his head. I'm not an activist. I'm not a fighter. You're exactly what they fear, Voss said. A truth they can't control. A black youth with his own voice, and a powerful father who finally chose to fight back. Suddenly, alarms. Red lights flashed across the monitors. Multiple incoming signals. Cameras disabled. Infrared sweep. They've found us, Voss said, grabbing her gun. Justice Carter opened a drawer, pulling out a flash drive. Elijah, listen to me. Take this. If anything happens to me, go to Loretta Green. She's a reporter. She knows the Third Rail. But Dad, no time. Trust no one but her. Understand? I understand. Good. The walls shook. A voice crackled over the speakers. Distorted. Robotic. Elijah Carter. Henry Carter. Your time is up. Then silence. Not a threat. A statement. The door exploded inward. Flashbangs. Men in gray. No insignia. No words. Justice Carter shielded Elijah. Agent Voss fired. Chaos. Screaming. And then, one shot. Sure. Precise. Elijah turned. His father collapsed. Blood. Everything slowed. Elijah screamed, "Dad!" But his father whispered, eyes barely open, "Run, son." And with the last strength in his voice, "Don't let them win." The system tried to break him once. Now, they've taken everything. Elijah Carter isn't just a target anymore. He's a witness. A survivor. Maybe a spark. But will he run or rise? Project Ashes has only just begun.